Hello, students. This is Mr. Martin with your Flip Classroom on Renaissance art. Our first slide today is going to be a comparison between Renaissance art, what the characteristics of it are. So the themes of Renaissance art included humanism, classical mythology, and secularism. So remember, what is humanism? Humanism, as we discussed in our last class, humanism is the idea of focusing on the human body and human achievement as opposed to religious themes. So sometimes you'll see paintings of everyday human life, examples of humanism. Another theme of Renaissance art is classical mythology. You're going to see some paintings throwing back to classical stories from ancient Greek and Roman mythology. And also the themes are that they're secular. Now, what's secularism? Secularism means something is less religious, something is non-religious. So for paintings during the Renaissance to be secular, again, it's showing that they are focused on the everyday life of the people, not so much religion. What are the characteristics? Well, they're realistic, there's anatomical correctness, and there's the appropriate depth and distance. So realism is this idea that the paintings look real. It almost looks, it's the closest thing to a photograph that can be taken. And during the Middle Ages, we've seen that anatomical correctness was an issue because bodies were oftentimes portrayed as disproportionate. Well, now bodies are going to be much more proportionate as people have a greater understanding of the human body, human anatomy, and human understanding. Also, the idea of depth and distance, the idea that things farther away from the canvas are going to appear farther away, and things that the artist wants to draw focus on is going to be closer to the canvas. It's going to be a little bit bigger. So let's compare medieval art with Renaissance art. Well, for starters, during the Middle Ages, art focused solely on religion. That was the big focus. Whereas during the Renaissance, we know art is going to be secular and it shows a variety of topics. Art during the Middle Ages was predominantly two-dimensional, right? Whereas art during the Middle Age or during the Renaissance was three-dimensional. And I'm going to show you some examples of this artwork in just a second. But I don't want you to think that, in 1299, art was two-dimensional, and then all of a sudden in 1300, the art was three-dimensional. It was a slow progression. During the Middle Ages, art really didn't have a linear perspective or a focal point. During the Renaissance, there would be a focal point as well as freestanding sculptures. And during the Middle Ages, there were no famous freestanding sculptures. For example, we think of the ancient Greeks with Credos boy and those types of sculptures during the classical age, and we think of the statue of David as one of the more famous Renaissance statues. But during the Middle Ages, there really wasn't a whole lot of famous sculptures. During the Renaissance, shading was used during their painting, as were vibrant colors really to tell the story of a painting. Whereas during the Middle Ages, lots of blues, golds, and reds were used. All right, we've seen these paintings side by side. They're both titled The Madonna and Child. One is an altar piece, while the other one is a later Renaissance piece. Again, just giving you that comparison, and I think we discussed this in class, but it gives you a very nice comparison between what medieval art looks like on the left and what early Renaissance artwork looks like on the right. So the first piece I'm going to show you guys is called St. Matthew, and this is a folio, and it was done carbon dated around 698 and 721 AD. So this is very early medieval artwork. Some of the things that stand out about it is St. Matthew sitting down writing the Bible. If I didn't tell you that this was medieval artwork, you would know that it's medieval because, well, it's religious. Very few people could read or write during the Middle Ages unless you were a member of the church. What makes this also medieval is the idea that there's no background, there's no focal point. It's kind of St. Matthew just out there without really a context to the story. Compare this painting with about 700 years later, we have God as the architect of the world. and this was painted around 1220 to 1230. So this is during the middle of the Middle Ages, if you will. The painting on the left, excuse me, the painting on the right, is a tapestry, and it shows God as the architect of the world, again with the emblazoned with the golds and dark blues and reds. And here is God as the architect of the world. And he's using tools like an architect would in order to design the world as the builder. If you notice, there's a little bit of depth right here as it looks like God's just stepping out of the canvas. So we're getting our first glimpse of something being three-dimensional. A later piece, this is called The Virgin with the Dead Christ, and this was sculpted around 1300, 1325. Notice that this piece, historians would call this time period the beginning of the Renaissance. But we're seeing that art is still taking on a very slow form. Da Vinci wouldn't come along until another 150 years. So art is still slow to catch up. And in particular, this art is very reflective of the struggles of the Northern Renaissance, which was struggling from the fallout from bubonic plague. So the art is very reflected there. It's kind of a very, very gory and dead Christ, and also the sculptures. It's very elongated and very awkward. This isn't a real brilliant piece that people would go to look at. So this next piece is very interesting, and this is called Lamention, and this is 1305. Very interesting about this piece is, well, take a look at the characters, and I want you to tell me, for a class, is this Renaissance or is this medieval? We're actually going to take a look at that tomorrow when we pick up with class, and I want you guys to decide, is this a Renaissance piece or is this a medieval piece? It could go either way. We will talk about this in some of the other later pieces, but I want you guys to have the basic qualities of what a Middle Age piece versus a Renaissance piece. Tomorrow in class, we will look at Renaissance art and Northern Renaissance art, and we'll be spending the rest of the year really analyzing how the different art movements shaped and reflected culture. So if I went too fast, just play the tape or play the video again. Like I said, I really just want you to take a look at some of the art pieces. I've also posted a couple links to some Khan Academy videos on the different artwork that we're going to be taking a look at, so feel free to watch them. Or you can even look some of these pictures up online if you want to see a high resolution. But like I said, we'll be talking about this at great depths tomorrow in class. If you have any questions, please feel free to post them on our class website.